Let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'd like to start by quickly introducing myself. My name is Joe Lacusa. I'm the manager of client services and support here. Many of you are probably used to working with Frank Piazza, who previously held this position, but unfortunately he's no longer with Farrows. Prior to picking up the role as support manager here, I led our client services or our optimization team, which you might be familiar with. Moving forward, we will all be under one umbrella where you can simply call us Client Services and Support Group. I'm looking forward to working with you all and getting to know anyone I haven't already had the pleasure of meeting in my 10 years here at Farrows. So welcome. I'm delighted to kick off our first webinar of 2017. Brian, you mind scrolling down to the next slide there?
Sure.
Like I said, I'm delighted to kick off our first webinar presented by one of our most senior engineers, Brian Rosengarten. We are setting a lofty goal of providing somewhere between 6 to 10 webinars this year. I think we did about 5 last year, so we'll do our best to stay on target. Today's topic will cover creating custom Uniprint pop-ups for Mac. As always, this session is being recorded and will be posted on our community site and YouTube channel after it's complete. During the presentation, if you have any questions, I would encourage you to post them in the chat window. We'll try to answer a few at the end of the webinar, and we'll post answers to the remaining questions on our community site. Go ahead, Brian, if you want to go to the next one. If you missed some of the webinar, want to review it again, or you just want to review some of our answers, head on over to the community site at any time. You'll just need to browse to community.farrows.com, or you can just navigate to it from farrows.com homepage and click on the community and support link and then community home. Once you're on the community homepage, look for a navigation bar on the right that says marketing resources, and there you'll find all the webinar recordings and other related topics and videos. Okay, you ready to get started, Brian? It's my great pleasure to introduce Brian Rosengarten, and he takes you through creating custom Uniprint pop-ups for Mac. Brian, if you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. One of the questions that we get a lot in support is, how do you make pop-ups for Mac? Because to make it for a Windows system, you can easily do so in the Farrows Administrator application, but doing so for a Mac is a little bit different. It's not difficult. The first time might be a little tricky, but then after that, after you've done 1 or 2, you should be home free and have a thorough understanding of how to do it. And this webinar today, I think you'll feel pretty confident if you've never done it before. In addition to this webinar, there is already documentation on our community site and our knowledge base on how to do this as well, and I'll show that to you at the end. So some of the things we're going to discuss here today is where to get the pop-up client, how do you create a printer if you don't have a PPD file. For those of you who don't know what a PPD file, that would be considered the driver file. We're going to talk about disk utility, the contents of the pop-up download that you get, the shell script that's inside that custom folder, which we'll get to, compressing the file, things how to test, and then afterwards we'll go a little bit into cups and how to set defaults and change some preferences of a driver if you've never done that before as well. Unfortunately, there's no documentation that I have already written on that, but that's next on my list of things to do. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about where you get this pop-up client, because if you don't already have it, it's readily available online on the Farrows website. So here's the homepage for the Farrows website. I'm going to go to Community and Support on the top, and we go down to Hotfixes and Service Packs. And as I slowly scroll down, the very first thing you'll see is Macintosh Components. So I'll click that. You'll see 2 different items. The first one is the Sign-Up Client, which is a completely different thing, so you don't want that. And then there's the Pop-Up Client. And you can see that the last one that has been uploaded was created in October 2015, and it does go through iOS X 10.12, which includes the latest version, Sierra, which I'm working on today. Now, I've already taken the liberty of course, downloading the file, and I've got it here in my Pop-Up files on my desktop, and I want to show you what it looks like. So this is the popup.dmg. For those of you who are not familiar with Macs, I'm going to mount the file to the drive so it looks like an actual drive letter. And when I come down into Finder, and I'm not going to install it. Let's minimize that. I just want to come down into Finder. And you'll see it's mounted there under Popup. Now there's nothing in it right now. It's just the PKG file, which basically is the installer file that'll put all the interesting components that we're about to create along with the pop-up for Pharos in Uniprint onto the user's workstation. So other contents that'll be in here will be a custom folder, which I'm going to go ahead and create momentarily, and a shell script and the PPD file. That's basically what you have inside the pop-up. Now, I can't work from this right now because this is a read-only file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it mounted, and the next thing I'm going to do is open up disk utility. So I'm going to go ahead and type in disk utility. And if you're familiar with the older disk utility, there were some changes that Apple made in it. You'll notice that I have the pop-up here, but I can't really do much with it outside of making partitions and running first data and whatnot. So what I need to do to achieve my goal, I need to customize the toolbar. And I did that by right-clicking in the blank area there. And what I need is image. So I'm going to take image and I'm going to drag it up here so it's in our toolbar. And then when I click image, I have some more options. Now, we're in a read-only file, and as you can see right now on the bottom it says read-only. I'm going to wind up making a rewritable one, so I like to call them RW. And I always like to work from the desktop because it's easier for me to find things. And I'm going to change this to read-write and hit save. So it's creating a disk, a new disk that's rewritable that we're going to be able to work from. It shouldn't take too long. There we go, and we can see it over here on the right. Now we've got that pop-up that was mounted. We're not going to use that anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and close it out, and I'm going to remount the rewritable. Remount, really I'm going to mount the rewritable one. So now when I come back into Finder and scroll down, we see the new pop-up. This is the one we're actually going to be able to make changes to. So again, I said there was going to be a custom folder in here, so let's go ahead and make that real quick. And then we're going to work within custom. So there's nothing in it right now. What we're going to do is we're going to make a shell script, and we're going to add the PPD file, which brings me to the PPD file. If you don't already have a driver file in mind, then what you need to do at a minimum is install the printer so that you can get a generic PostScript driver. That's what usually we recommend. So at this point in time, I'm going to move over to my other Mac here. So Joe, if you can switch over, that would be great.
Should be all set.
Okay, this is going to be running from my VM. I don't see it on the screen. No. Do you guys see my, Joe, do you see my new one?
No, let me try to, How about now? Let's try to change it again.
You tell me. Can you see the mouse moving?
Nope.
Okay, then we'll just stick where we're at then. I apologize.
Oh.
So I'm going to bring Systems Preferences, and we're going to go into Printers and Scanners. And I'm going to go ahead and add a new printer. So again, this is if you don't have a PPD file and you need to get some kind of driver file that can be used. We're going to add a new printer. And again, like I did before, in order to do what I need to do, I'm going to go ahead and customize toolbar and add advanced to my menu. Before it was image. This time it's advanced. When it's done searching for printers, which should only take a moment, I'm going to add a new printer and tell it to use a generic PostScript driver. There we go. And when I add the printer, I'm going to tell it to use the type Windows Printer via Spools S. Okay? And on the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and tell it to use the generic PostScript printer. I can give it any name I want. And then in the URL, I'm going to use SMB, and I'm going to type server name, in this case for my VM, which has a very long and arduous, non-user-friendly name, and then the name of the queue that is configured in Ferris Administrator. Now this Mac won't be able to reach that, so it's probably not going to add, but we'll try. And again, I can call this anything I want. Now, in many cases, if you already have your PPD file, you do not need to go through this process. What this will just do, again, is just add a generic PostScript driver that we can use. And while that's adding, I'll show you where it's going to be located. Come back in here to Finder, and we're going to, I like to go to Go to Folder, and you'll see there's Library, Printers. Click Go, PPDs, Contents, and then Resources. In here, if this adds properly, I will see in the bottom, and I don't believe it has added properly, a PPD file with this name of the server. And then I can use that file. You also notice in here that some of these files have a .gz as their file extension. Those are actually zipped files. So you would have to extract them in order to get the PPD out of there. So it looks like it is completing here. Let's see if it wants to follow through, and then I can at least show you the file. And what you would wind up doing is grabbing this file out of this resources directory, and then we're going to put it in that custom folder. Now, if this winds up failing, I've got one I can use. I've got several, actually. It's taking its sweet old time. So I'm a rather impatient person. If you ask my children, they will confirm that. And what I'm going to do is grab the PPD out of here. I've got it in this other directory. This one right here, and we'll try this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just, because I already have a PPD that I'd like to use, I'm going to copy that, open up another Finder window here. And go to my mounted Popup, go into my custom folder, and I'm going to paste it in here. So now I've got a PPD driver to work from. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this so it doesn't, oh, it's not going to let me, so I'll let it finish doing what it's going to do. The other thing that we need in here is the shell script. Now I've already got it written, so I'm going to go ahead and just copy this one, and then we're going to go through the details of the shell script. And I'm going to paste that in here as well. So if we were to back up here, inside the mounted Popup DMG, we have the popup.pkg, which is what we downloaded from our website. And then we have a custom folder that I manually created, and I put a PPD file on, our driver file, and then I have a shell script. So let's go ahead and talk about the shell script. And I'm going to open this with text editor. You can use anything you want. I always use text editor. It's much easier. Hey, look, it added the printer. Well, it's creating the printer. It's just about done. And let's move the shell script over while it's doing its magic over here. And let's look at this line. This is where your magic is. Now there are some switches you can add here. I'm not going to cover that in today's conversation. We're just going to go through the basic Mac pop-up creation. So we've got LP admin, and this, by the way, it's just straight out, is like if you're in the Windows world, it's just a command, like you would type into a command prompt. And on the Mac, obviously, you'd be typing it into terminal. So I could hypothetically just type this into terminal. But we LP admin space lowercase -p, and then a name for the queue. So I'm going to call this test. Okay, and then we get -V, the Popup. It's telling it to use the Popup application that is on the Mac. And then the server name. So I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to type in win-u1s 9fk jp 348, and then the name of the queue that is configured already on your Uniprint system. So in my case, it's called test. Another space dash uppercase E space hyphen uppercase P, another space, and then the name of the PPD file. So in this case, like I said, I already had one already created. I'm going to take this out and type in awesome driver, leave the PPD in there. So this is all you need for a basic shell script to add one printer for a Mac pop-up. The great thing about this is that once you've got one created, you can utilize the shell script that you've already created for others and just tweak them, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just you already done the magic per se. So and you can have more than one in here. You can have 80 of them if you want. I'm just doing one for our example. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to save this. But one thing that most people miss in this entire process is when they save it, they forget to change the format. You'll notice that it's giving me the option to save it as rich text. When you first start up text edit, it's usually in RTF format. We don't want it in that. We want to make it plain text. Mine that actually already happened to be in plain text. So I'm going to change it to plain text, and then I'm going to resave it just for good measure. Okay. If you don't do that step, none of it's going to work. So you must make it plain text. I'm going to go ahead and close this. Okay, that's fine. I don't care about that. Now I'm going to kind of backtrack here. If we go back into printers and scanners, we see the printer that I just added. And if we go into resources, and let's do a refresh here and see if it added it. Did it put it at the top? Let's go back one. It did not put it in there. It should have put a file in here for that particular printer. I apologize that it didn't, but it usually does. Okay, so we have our post-install shell script, and this has a .txt. We don't want a .txt. We need it to be a .sh because it is a shell script. And I will say use .sh, and we've got our driver. So as of right now, I've got basically what I need in order to follow through, but there are several different steps involved in getting this in place to make sure it works. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to delete this printer that we had just taken that time to add, and I'm going to move this over to the left so we can see it in real time. Now we're mounted on a rewritable. I'm kind of very thorough when I do this, so I like to make sure and go through this in several different stages, adding it, deleting it, adding it, and deleting it, and that'll make sense in a moment. So I'm going to just run the installer. So I'm going to run this PKG file. Let's go ahead and hit continue. Just follow through the menus, and tells us how much space it's going to take. Click install, and then it's going to go ahead and ask me for my password for the Mac itself, and let me type that in. You finish the installation, and it's through. Now, I skipped a step, and I did that on purpose. And why did I skip the step? Because this is the part where most people forget to do, in addition to the previous one that I said that people forget, which is making sure that the shell script is in plain text. We need to change the permissions on the shell script. You'll notice on the left, it didn't add it, right? So I'm going to open up Terminal. Now you like to use Spotlight. A little magnifying glass in the top right because it gives me everything I need to do. And what we're going to do is run a sudo command on the file itself. Now I need to make sure I'm in the right directory, so I'm going to go ahead and change directory, volumes, and I don't know any Mac guys out there with the changes in Sierra, it does require you to type in volumes with a capital V. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, and everything has to be is cap sensitive. We're going to go into the pop-up that's mounted, and then we're going to go into the custom folder where the file is. Okay, and we can tell that we're in there because it says custom. And what I'm going to do is run this sudo command, sudo chmod, and we're going to use 755, and I'll go through that in a moment. Type in postinstall.sh. It should ask me for my password again, because this does require administrative rights in order to make the changes to the file. Basically what we're doing is we're changing permissions on the file, because right now it's basically just a read file. Even you notice we ran it and it did nothing. So let me go ahead and type in the password. It went. So let me stop here for a moment and discuss what the 755 means. So there are 3 different numbers here that have 3 different levels. The first 7 is considered the user level. The middle the middle number 5 is the group level, and the third number is considered the world level. This is a maxing. So each number within here has certain different meanings to them. So with the user level of the first one, 7, is actually putting in what we call in order read, write, and execute 4, 2, 1. That's what level 7 means. 4 represents for read, allowing it to read. 2 allows it to write or modify. And then 1 is read, write, delete, modify, basically full control. So by typing in a 7, that gives all 3 of those to this file. The second number in group level 5, which is the same as the last one, is a 4, a 0, and a 1. Again, 4 is allowed to read, and then writing is not allowed, and then read, write, delete, and modify is allowed, and that's for the last 2. So basically what we've now done is we've changed the permissions on the shell script itself to allow it to be used in the way that we want. So now that I've done that, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to rerun the PKG. And again, type in my password. It's all exciting when it does it the correct way. If we look over here in our printers and scanners, now because I've made these changes to the file permissions, I have a printer in here and it can be used, and then you can test it. Now I talked about adding and deleting and adding and deleting. The reason why I'm now going to delete it is because we can't distribute this file to users. Why? Because it's rewritable. We don't want to use that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make change the compression on this file. So we've got it mounted here. It's called Popup. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a new image, just like we did earlier to make the rewritable. And we're going to go ahead and make a read-only file. Now, some people skip this, and that's okay. You don't have to actually make a read-only file, but it's kind of nice to have 3 different iterations of this file. So again, to keep things simple, I use RW for rewritable, RO for read-only. I'm going to go ahead and save it. And I'm going to rerun the package again to make sure that it still works as read-only. Now you could distribute the read-only, but it went, oh, disk management error, awesome. And it's not giving me any error messages, which is great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close out a disk utility here. I apologize for the error. And it's not going to let me. What I was trying to show you is that we make a read-only and then we make a compressed version of the file as well. The compressed version is the one that you would wind up giving out to your constituents, your users, your students and whatnot, that they can install onto their workstations. One of the things that a lot of clients like to do when they've got this built, they wind up coming back and they call me and say, Brian, this is great, everything's working fine, but I want to either turn duplexing on or I want to change some other features with it. on Macs, when you want to set the preferences, you have to use something called Cups. Now, Cups is off by default. And when I say by default, meaning the first time you go onto either the workstation to access Cups, you're going to open up a browser, http:// and then type in localhost :631. Now mine is on right now, but when it's not on, this is what you see. Web interface is disabled. The web interface is currently disabled. Run cupsctl web interface equals yes to enable it. Now actually, mine looks like it's not working. And because, I mean, it looks like it's working, but it's really not. So I'm going to open up Terminal here, and I'm just going, you can either copy paste this in or just type it in. Just like it shows. And then when I come back here and do a refresh, I now have access to Cups, and I can do anything I want. If you ever forget how to do that, just do a Google search and just type in Mac Cups enable, and it'll show you. But the great thing is that at least that screen tells you exactly what to do. So as long as you follow the directions, you're fine. Now, I have to go ahead and reinstall this printer. I'm doing it out of order. And let's minimize this. It's still giving me a hard time. So what I'm going to wind up doing is using the original one that we had. I'm going to continue, run through this again, type in my password again. Apple really likes their security, which is a good thing. Let it install, and there's my printer. Again, I mentioned earlier in the shell script they can have several different lines of LP admin commands. That would allow you to install multiple queues, printers simultaneously. So if that were the case here, it would run through and then add all of them in here at the same time. Okay. So we got a printer called Test, and now if I want to get to make changes, I'm going to again go back into Cups here in my browser, and let's go refresh this page by clicking Administration and then go to Printers, and you will see the two printers here, Gandalf and Test. So we're working with Test, and I'm going to go ahead and set the default options. Now, each driver is different, each PPD is different, so you may not be able to accomplish the goal that you're looking for based on the driver file that you're using. Some of them are very basic, black and white color, duplex, and simplex, and that's it. This one's got a little bit of extra stuff in there, so that's good. I can show you some things. But we're going to go ahead and let's go to Options, Installed, and you can see we can turn on different trays, enable envelope feeder and whatnot, and go to Finishing. We can change the output bin, turn stapling on and off, paper for booklet, manual duplexing, lots of different options here, and paper quality, paper feed. Let's go to printing. So again, this driver is going to be different than the one you probably use. So I'm going to go back to General, and here's our duplexing. So we can turn on long edge binding or short edge binding on or off, collating, the media size, the print quality, and let's go back to Options Installed. This one's obviously not giving me the option to turn color on and off. I'm not quite sure if there's a black and white driver or not. It looks like it is because it's not giving me the option to change between color and black and white, but that's okay because I just wanted to show you where you can come and make these changes. So I'm going to make one change here so we have a file to work with. And what I'll do is I'll go to General and I'll just change this two-sided to long edge binding. And I'm going to click Set Defaults. It didn't like that. Okay. So let's do a media type maybe and change it to plain. Let's give that, so let's go back. Let's do short edge binding. See, so let me save that. No, it doesn't like that at all. So we'll keep it as plain, and passwords are always fun. All right, so it doesn't like my password either. So I'm unauthorized to make that change. Let me show you where that file would be, because there's going to be other files there that we can show. So if I'm in Finder and I go back to go to folder, and I'm going to go to etc. and cups. Get rid of that P there. You'll see a folder here called PPD. And there is a PPD we can work with. So test.ppd and ganoff.ppd. Those are already there because the printers have been installed. But you can't utilize these files until you've made the changes that you wanted to change in cups. After you've made those changes, you could come into this directory, at this PPD. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this one, and we're going to go back into the custom folder of our mounted pop-up and paste it in here. I'm going to rename this one to old. And actually, in the end, you won't wind up even needing that one. So you can wind up deleting it. I'm going to rename test.ppd to awesomedriver.ppd. And then I'm going to come in here and delete this printer again. I'm going to rerun it using the PKG. Go through the steps, just like we did before. Type in the password. It seems like it's tedious, but it's all for a reason. Apple promises us that it's for a reason. And there is the printer again. But this time, it's not using the initial PPD that we had in here that I renamed to old, which might be the generic PPD that you originally got, but it's now utilizing a new driver file that has preferences so that when users install and run this package to get the pop-up onto their workstations, they now have those preferences and default options that you wanted them to have. Because remember, some of these options are off by default, and you might be turning them on by using cups. Now, I mentioned earlier that I have some documentation that kind of goes through all of this in detail that's in our knowledge base. Again, I'll show you that later. But it does not cover what I just went through. Let's minimize this, and let's see, did it ever finish back here? Or is it still in a weird state? It's still in a weird state, so I'm going to have to go ahead and force quit this. I apologize. Disk utility, and that's gone. Let's reopen it, and let's see if it'll let me make a compressed file for you. So let's say this package that I just made is exactly the way we want it. And we're ready to distribute it to users. I can call it anything I want. So I'm going to call it now Awesome Package. Again, if your packages are being created for specific areas in your college or specific queues, you might give it a name that makes a little bit more sense to your situation. Or you can just call it Mac Package. It's totally up to you, but make sure it makes sense to you and to the user. And this time I'm going to go ahead and make a compressed version. I'm going to hit Save, and let's hope it goes through and doesn't crash on me this time. Now, there's got to be something wrong with the disk utility on this Mac, so I apologize for that. I can't display that. But basically what it would wind up doing, if it were to go through properly, is it would make a zipped version of the file that you can distribute to your user base. So they can run it on their Macs, and everything would hypothetically go through just fine. So I apologize for a couple of those things not cooperating. But I'd like to go ahead and open up, at this point in time, any questions that anybody might have.
Brian, we've got a couple questions here. Do you have the notes? Do you want me to read you off a couple?
Yeah, please, that'd be good.
Okay, I'll just read the last couple that came in. What's the string to go to the cups PPD folder? It came from Bill Casper. That one just came in.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? With the string for what?
Sorry. What's the string to go to the cups PPD folder?
The string, I assume that meant the address. So to get to the CUPS PPD folder, again, if you're in Finder, you can go to Go to Folder, and it's in the etc. CUPS, and to add to it, it's PPDs, a little bit more direct, and there's the PPDs. Wonderful thing about the internet is that if you do a Google search, it does a good job of showing you where everything is. And just type in CUPS and directory, Mac, and you'll get it. I mentioned that documentation that is already done online. Let me show you where that is real quick. If we go to pharos.com, come on, browser, you can do it. It wants to. Let's try. Look, if you're familiar with our community, which I believe most people are, when you get onto the Pharos website, here it comes, and you go to community and support, and there's a knowledge base option, just like we had before, hotfixes and service packs. If we go to knowledge base, and then in the search, just type in Mac package usually is sufficient. And I believe it's the first file, yeah, creating custom Uniprint pop-up packages for Mac. I have updated it slightly so that it has some screenshots from Sierra and some other changes that were done inside disk utility. After it downloads, here it is. And I even go through inside the documentation about adding the initial printer if you don't have a PPD file that you want to use. Most people do. Most people already have a PPD. And keep in mind that the generic PostScript driver that is used when you go through this route that we discussed at the beginning really doesn't have many options. It's pretty much black and white versus color and simplex versus duplex. And sometimes it may not even be color and black and white. It might just be black and white. But here again, in my example, we use Windows Printer via spools F, use the SMB with the server name and the Q name, give it any name you want, and then I choose the PostScript driver in most cases. Any other questions in there, Joe?
Yeah, I'll give you another one. Just popped up here from Gene. I've used this method with HP drivers and on new OS installs. On the first print, the OS wants to download the HP driver package from Apple. Does using a generic PPD prevent that?
No, actually, well, using a generic PPD, sure, because you're not using an HP driver, but remember, if you do use a generic driver, you don't have all those functionalities that a lot of people want to have and features that are included in that HP driver. And actually, there are other situations with other manufacturers as well where you need not only to put, the user have to have that package already installed on their computer. If they don't have it, you can incorporate that into your shell script and inside your custom folder so that it will install that into the user's workstation. In most cases, those files are quite large. They could be 70 megabytes, 80 megabytes, making your pop-up package going from 5 megs to now 85 or 90 megs. Or I've seen some that were over 100. So keep that in mind when you're making it. If that's something you need to incorporate in there, then you also are going to have to use disk utility to increase the size of your mounted pop-up volume. That could be a little tricky depending on your permissions, the permissions that you have to do certain things on your computer. It's not impossible, but with the changes they made to Sierra from previous versions of OS X, it does get a little tricky in order to do that. So you may have to increase that, and you may need to have that file, that large group, which usually installs a bunch of DLLs and driver files onto the user's workstation. We have run into that before.
You ready for another question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and there's a lot of great comments here I want to mention, and we'll get those added to the community site and maybe to this PDF that Brian shared as well. So these are coming in really quick, so maybe we'll take just a couple more, and then we'll close and put the rest up on the site. Does that sound good?
Sure.
All right, they're coming in so fast. I got to pick one here. All right, how do you add network login to the script? For example, a student-owned computer.
You broke up there in the mid-question. Can you repeat it again? I'm sorry.
Sure. The question is, how do you add network login permissions to the script? For example, a student-owned computer.
Network login. I don't know the answer to that. I apologize.
Okay, no problem.
Find out though.
Yeah, we'll get the answer to that, and we'll get that up on the site. Let me give you another one here. I'm just going to snag one from the top. All right. How about? Nope, lost my spot. Okay, this one just came in from. It says, would you do the exact same thing to select for student pop-ups as you would faculty staff that are in the different Farrell's print queues? Any way to associate Active Directory name?
That seems very similar to the previous question.
Yeah.
Using network identification. When you're working with these pop-ups, it really doesn't care about network identification from what I've understood. Basically what we're doing is we're putting an application onto the user's workstation that will generate a question and establish communication between the workstation and the Uniprint server. The question will most likely ask the user's username and their password. That would be their Active Directory information. And then that is passed on along with the job to the Uniprint server, and then it associates, not only does it authenticate the user, but it's going to associate that user with a specific account within the Ferris database, associate that job with that user's account, so that when the user walks up to a device or terminal to authenticate, they see their job there.
Okay, how about two more quick ones?
Sure.
Pick one that was pretty recent, and we'll pick one from the beginning because there were a lot of questions. This one comes in from Mike Bate. How do you add driver/PPD installs to packages without defining queues?
Well, the first thing that I went through when I was adding a printer, again, was just to get a PPD file. So if you already have the PPD files, you don't need to go through any of that. You can just create your pop-up using the pop-up that you downloaded, creating a custom folder, and throwing the PPD files right in here. I don't know if that's answering the question, but it sounds like it is.
We'll make sure to get these answered thoroughly too, and get them up on the site. All right, here comes another one. Can multiple PPDs be added to one customization folder? We've got two types of printers that our students print to. Or should we create two different pop-up clients, one for each type of printer?
It's up to you. The only reason really to make two different pop-up clients for the Mac would be is if you want to distribute them one queue per pop-up. Again, as I stated earlier, you can have as many queues as you want using as many PPDs as you want in one package. You just have to make sure that your shell script has multiple lines and each one refers to a different PPD file. There is, how should I put this, no right or wrong way of looking at it. If you want to minimize the number of pop-ups you have, then make fewer. But if you want to have one for each queue, then you can do that. Once you've created one and you know it works, all you're basically doing is changing the shell script so that it refers to the name of the queue, the name of the queue on the Ferris database, and then the PPD file.
Okay. I'm just trying to sort through some of the questions. Some of these are just repeats that you answered already, and a couple that were asked I think you showed in the presentation already. So maybe we can end it there. Anything else to end, Brian?
No, not really, except for the fact that keep in mind that the first time you attempt to do this, it seems very confusing. It really does. The first time I did it, I was really confused. It took me about 3 goes before I got it down. But once you get it down, making new ones really simple, especially since you already have the hard work done. You've got one as your template that you can use, and then you can just change the name afterwards to make it refer to the queue and using the driver you want. The goal here is to understand before you even start this what queues you're going to put in there, the names of those queues, which driver file you want to use. If you don't know those pieces of information, then you have to find those out first, and then you can start. And that we're here to help you. So if you're running any problems, feel free to contact support, because that's what we're here for. That's what you pay us for.
Great. Well, thanks, Brian, and again, everybody, thanks for joining us. A lot of great comments I see here in the notes, as well as some more questions that will get answered. A lot of comments from Bill. That's great feedback, Bill Casper. We'll get that added where appropriate, and we'll look forward to talking to everybody again soon. So again, thanks everybody for taking the time out. Brian, thanks for doing a wonderful job. Look forward to seeing you again. Look for another topic soon for another webinar. We'll try to do one within the next month or so. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.